Namaste, welcome everyone. My name is Kassandra and I'm going to take you through this hour-long, really stretchy flow. This is a slow practice to cultivate flexibility in our bodies, but also flexibility in our minds. This is meant to be a very introspective, nourishing practice. Definitely more on the intermediate side of things, a few more advanced stretches thrown in, but rest assured, this is a full body tune-up practice, getting deep into our hamstrings, our hips, our shoulders, our spine. You do need to have 2 blocks, especially to make some of those more intense stretches maybe a little bit more accessible. So let's start in supported fish pose using your blocks. And I'm placing them on their second level here. Because I'm a little bit on the taller side, I like to have my first block this way. If you're a little shorter, you might be more comfortable having it the other way. So the first one goes between the shoulder blades to support your upper back, and the other block supports the back of your head. And you can take a butterfly position with your legs here if you'd like, or you can just keep your legs out straight in front of you. And try to relax your shoulders, melting them away and off of the blocks. And you might close your eyes. And because we'll be moving a little bit slower in this practice and taking a little bit longer in the poses, really kind of marinating in them in a way, this practice can be a good opportunity for you to work through something, potentially. If there's something you're looking to gain a little bit of clarity or insight on, some emotions that you're having a hard time processing. I find that often I get the most insight into an issue when I'm on my mat, and not even necessarily by thinking logically and focusing my attention on that issue or on the discomfort or the stress or whatever it is that I'm going through, but just naturally by giving myself the time and the space to physically slow down and tune into my body. And then it seems like naturally I'm able to also alleviate mental and emotional tension. So take about 5 breaths here, in and out through your nose. Get even heavier on the blocks. Feeling a nice expansion through your heart. And we'll stay in supported fish, but if you had your butterfly legs, just straighten your legs out in front of you and just see what it's like for you to extend your right arm up overhead. So you'll notice it's a pretty big stretch through that right shoulder. Really lengthen and reach out through your right hand, through those fingertips. If it's too much, you can release and just bend at your elbow. And you can circle that right hand and arm all the way back down to where it was. Feel that stretch through the pectoral. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. Stretch your left arm up overhead. You might notice one side might feel a little bit more intense than the other. And you can slide that all the way back down. And you can tuck your chin towards your chest. And go ahead and lift yourself up here. and we're gonna find a deer pose with our legs. So bring your right shin parallel to the top of the mat, left shin parallel to the longer edges of the mat, and I have both my knees completely in line with my hips here, so it's a 90-degree angle. And we're gonna focus on internal hip rotation first, so targeting that left inner thigh. Think of pushing and rolling that left hip back as you walk your hands kind of in a diagonal back behind you here. And I'm flexing the feet. You might need to readjust your stance a little. Just looking for a nice stretch and sensation through the inside of our left hip and left thigh. Five breaths here. And depending on how far back you were, you can start walking your hands back in. And keep your legs as they are, but this time really rotate so that you're facing over towards the front of your mat, towards your right thigh. And you can walk your hands out in front of you. Maybe bring one of your blocks under your chest or forehead if you need more support. Otherwise, we're gonna fold on down. And you might not be going all the way, that's totally fine. So kind of like a less intense variation of pigeon pose. Just trying to see how that right glute and right hip are feeling today. Soften the space between your shoulder blades. And push your hands into the mat. Let's come all the way up. And before we do deer pose on the other side, let's come into a seated twist. So you might need to bring your right foot in a little bit. Just swing that left leg out in front of you. Cross your left foot over the top of your right thigh and really press down into that left hip and left sit bone. And you might hook your right elbow to that inner thigh crease as you twist. Push down into your big left toe. Stay lifted and tall through your spine. Release your twist, Gomukhasana knee pile. So this is an intense pose to do first thing as we begin our class, but we're going to revisit it later on. So I just want you to check in to see where you're at, and then you'll be able to tell what the transformation was like as we progress. So you're just trying to get your left knee to stack on top of the right as much as is appropriate to you. Let's bend our elbows out in front of one another, wrap your left arm under your right, binding once or twice, and maybe just hold here for this first pose, probably intense enough. You're trying to push your palms and your forearms together, stretching through your upper back. And just feeling that pose through your outer hips. See if you can lift your elbows up, arching your back, finding a little back bend. And let's release the arms, release the legs. Just take a little windshield wiper motion here, dropping your knees side to side, and then we'll find our deer pose on the second side. So this time you'll be aligning your left shin to the top of the mat, right shin to the longer edge of your mat, and we'll start with that internal hip rotation, inner thigh stretch, so you can walk your hands back kind of in a diagonal as you press your right hip down towards the mat. So there's really no need to go too far here. Just find that first point of intensity where you're still able to breathe deeply and you don't feel like you have to contract your muscles completely in order for the sensation to be bearable. That's really not what we're looking for. We want to breathe some softness and some ease into our poses. Take a few more deep breaths here. And you can start walking your hands back in. This time face over towards the top of the mat, and we're gonna fold down for this variation of our pigeon pose, diving deep into deer pose, maybe with your blocks or your hands to support your head, or you can melt all the way down. Notice if you're shrugging your shoulders up towards your ears, try to press them down. Big breath in through your nose, and on the exhale, start to lift your way back up, and we'll take our seated twist. So you might need to bring that left foot in a little bit, swing that right leg out in front of you, cross your right foot over the top of your left thigh, anchor both sit bones to the mat before hooking your left elbow. Right hand can be behind you for a little bit of extra support as you twist. No slouching, no rounding through your spine. Think of growing a little taller while in this pose. Let's release. Go Mukhasana on the second side. Coming into this knee pile, cow face pose. Just to check in to see what your hips feel like now. Bending at the elbows, right arm under the left, binding once or also twice. So here the emphasis is pressing our shoulders down, keeping our elbows up, and moving the hands away from our face. You might find a little back bend here by lifting your elbows up. Let's release, unwind your legs and your arms, little windshield wiper motion here. And you can bring your blocks, placing them at the top of the mat. We're just gonna come to tabletop for a few rounds of cat and cow, but you'll wanna have your blocks somewhere close by for our next flows. So just cat and cow when you're ready. Inhale, drop your belly, lift your gaze, tailbone up. Exhale, round, contract, and draw in. And keep going like this. Last one. Come back to a neutral stance and come down onto your forearms. We're gonna do cat and cow a few rounds, but from our forearms. See if you can target your upper back a little bit more in this variation. So inhale, drop and lift your gaze. Exhale, broaden through your upper back. One more. Slide forward onto your belly, into your Sphinx pose, little back bend here as you open through your chest. And you can turn your left palm or left forearm at about a 45-degree angle, so it's just in a diagonal for more support. Bring your right fingertips behind you and off to the side, and you're gonna push down into that right hand. Look over your right shoulder as you twist here. Push your right hip bone down. So you're really just lifting and twisting from your mid back and upper back, not twisting your pelvis. Let's release. Same thing to the other side. Right forearm down, left fingertips behind you. Press and lift, looking over that left shoulder. Push your left hip down. And let's melt down to the mat. You can stack one hand over the other. We're gonna take a belly butterfly. These are poses I've been doing a lot lately. So you can widen your legs, bend at your knees, and see if you can bring your feet together to touch. And this can be quite intense. We really don't do a lot of these kinds of poses in yoga. And see if you can try to lengthen your tailbone back. And just breathe into your lower belly here. For some people, this is naturally very easy. A lot of this doesn't really have anything to do with how flexible you are. Often it's just how your body is made, the shape and the structure of your pelvis and your low back. So really let go of any judgment that you have of yourself when it comes to flexibility and how far along you think you should be or what you should be able to do. There's tons of stuff I can't do that, you know, if I ask someone what they think someone who's been practicing 15 years should be able to do, I just can't. And that's fine. Now see if you can keep your legs in this shape. You're going to bring your hands kind of beside the top of your rib cage and now push back up until you bring your feet flat to the mat and then press back into this wide like a child's pose. So really reaching out through your hips, sliding your arms forward. And I'm gonna keep my chin on the mat for this variation because I am trying to target my upper back a little more. If this is uncomfortable for your neck, please don't do this. Just keep your forehead down to the floor. 10 breaths right here in the pose. And slowly walk it back up. And we'll find our downward facing dog, Adho Mukha Svanasana. Curl tailbone up towards the sky. Try to find as much length as is possible here. And from this downward dog, lift both heels off the mat, and you're gonna drop your heels over to the right, and you might want to bend your right knee, keeping your left leg straight. And I like to come up onto the left fingertips here as I look underneath my left shoulder. So a big side body stretch. Come back through to center, lift both heels up before dropping them over towards the left, and this time bend your left knee, keep your right leg straight, maybe come up onto your right fingertips and look underneath your right shoulder. Find your downward facing dog, centered here. Right leg stretches up to the sky, bend your right knee, open up your hip. Lift that knee up even higher if that's possible, and step your foot forward between your palms to the top of your mat. And now let's grab a hold of our blocks. I like to use them on their highest level, framing my front foot and letting my hips relax down, rolling the shoulders back. And not putting too much weight in your wrists here. Try to be kind to your joints. Into your pyramid pose stretch. We're keeping this wide stance, so it's very likely that your back heel will not be touching the mat, which is totally fine. Just get that stretch through your calf, through your ankle, and of course, deeply stretching the back of our right leg. Go ahead and lift head and chest so you're parallel to the mat. Bend your front knee a little bit just so you can bring your back foot in and anchor that back heel. So a more traditional stance here. And we'll add our revolved triangle. I'm gonna keep my block on its highest level because it's just what feels the best to me. You can always lower it for more intensity. Otherwise, right arm stretches up towards the sky. So big spinal rotation here, trying to keep our hips facing forward. I know that's very challenging. Creating as much space as we can between both palms. And release that right hand back down. Bend into your front knee. You're gonna walk your blocks out in front of you. Any variation of standing splits that you'd like. So I'm actually gonna bring my hands off of the block because that feels a little more stable to me. You're just lifting and reaching that left leg up, straightening the right leg as you fold in. And release, ragdoll fold at the top of the mat. You can have a wider stance, maybe holding onto your elbows and swaying a little side to side. Relax your head and your neck. Release your hands down to the mat, bend your knees and push into your heels to slowly rise all the way up. Find your mountain pose at the top of the mat, Tadasana, feet hip width distance apart. Shine your palms forward, reach your tailbone down, close your eyes. Feel your weight evenly distributed through all four corners of both feet. And you can just open your eyes, bring your hands to your hips. We're just gonna stretch into our feet a little bit from here, keeping it really simple. You're just gonna come up onto the ball of that right foot and push your arch forward. Try not to let your heel sway from side to side. So you're just pushing it forward. And then you're going to lift and point the toe. So you're now pressing the top of your foot down and still reaching and intending that arch to press forward. Maintaining good posture and release. Doing the same thing on the other side. So just come up onto the ball of your left foot and press it forward. And lift and point the toe. Getting a big stretch here. And release, shaking it out. You still want to have your blocks somewhere close by. Let's take a little slow flow. Inhale, stretch your arms up overhead. Exhale, swan dive. And we're going to linger here for one full breath. So take an inhale through the nose and a big exhale out the mouth. Halfway lift, a full breath cycle as well here. So inhale, lean forward into the balls of the feet. Hold as you exhale. And then come all the way down, bend into your knees, plant your palms, step your feet back. We're gonna hold our plank pose, draw your lower belly in, strong through your arms, and come all the way down to your belly. Find your cobra pose. We're gonna hold this one, full breath cycle in and out. Melt your heart forward and down, downward facing dog. Lift your hips all the way up and back. And from this down dog, I want you to widen your feet towards the edges of your mat and turn your heels in, toes out. Bend your knees as you press your hips back. So like a little frog stretch. And go ahead and straighten your legs. Bring your feet back to being hip width distance apart. Let's extend our left leg up to the sky. Bend your left knee, open up your hip. Really reach that left knee up as high as it'll go before stepping your left foot to the top of the mat. And then grabbing and using your blocks, placing them underneath your palms. Roll your shoulders down. And just let your hips melt. Keep some of the weight out of your wrists. And you can straighten that left leg into a wider version of pyramid pose, pushing into that back heel, trying to keep your hips relatively squared to the top of the mat. You can bend a little, start to lift your chest up, bend a little bit into that front knee just to walk your right foot in a couple inches, enough so that you can ground that back heel down before straightening your right leg again. Make sure your hand and your block are underneath your right shoulder and lift out of that right shoulder to initiate your twist, pulling up and reaching your left arm up to the sky. And draw your lower belly in. Release left hand back down to the block. Let's move our blocks forward into your standing splits. You're gonna kick off, push off of that back leg, and maybe your hands come down to the mat if you prefer. Try to really lengthen and stretch your legs away from one another. Ragdoll fold at the top of the mat. Bend the knees a little, just so you can let your upper body drape over your thighs. You might want to hold onto your elbows and sway gently side to side. I'm just going to move my props further away so they're not in my way. Release your hands down, bend your knees, push into your heels to curl and lift. Finding your mountain pose, Tadasana, feet hip-width distance apart, palms shining forward. And rather than stretching into our feet, let's add a little side body stretch here. Reach your right arm up and over. You can slide your left hand down your leg, push out into your right hip. Coming all the way back up. Same thing to the other side. And lifting up. Let's take a slow flow. Inhale, reach it up. And fold all the way down. Hold for a full breath cycle once you're here. Halfway lift, a full breath cycle here as well. Plant your palms, step it back to plank. One more breath cycle. And you can lower down into your cobra. Hold it here, keep your elbows bent. Pull your shoulders back, reach your heart forward. And we'll release, downward facing dog. Press your hips all the way up and back. And from here, let's stretch the right leg up towards the sky, create some space, and you're gonna step your foot to the outer edge of your right hand. Bring your back knee down. So I wanna have my right knee over the top of my ankle and both palms to the inside of that leg. Now this is option one. Option two, you're going to curl the right toes up, roll to the outer edge of that right foot, and then maybe come down onto your forearms, or you can use your blocks, putting them underneath your chest or underneath your forehead. Whatever feels the most comfortable to you here. And we're gonna marinate a little bit in this one, 10 to 20 breaths or so. So if you feel like 10 to 20 breaths is way too long, that just means that you've gone a little too far into this pose. Make sure you are not trying to chase sensation. There's nothing to prove here. You might feel more comfortable totally dropping your head, fully relaxing your neck. You can lift your head up. You can do this either from your forearms or from your palms. We're going to add a quad stretch. So leaning to the left, you can reach your right hand back, bend into your left knee, and see if you can pull that heel in towards your glute. So again, if it's too much to be on your forearm, just come up onto your hand or even use your block for a little more lift. And I'm kind of letting my right shoulder roll back. So there's a tiny bit of a back bend here. Very carefully release the hold of your back foot so you're facing forward again, and come back up onto your palms. You're going to toe heel your right foot in just so you're hip width distance apart again rather than having a wider stance. I still want my knee aligned over my ankle, and you can lift yourself up. We'll take a side low lunge. So my left foot is now going to be aligned or pointing towards the right long edge of my mat. My left shin is parallel to the back of my mat. And as you bend into that front knee here, you're gonna try to push your knee open. So really deep stretch through the inner thighs. And you can take a little chin mudra, thumb and index finger together. Try to lengthen your tailbone down. Let's press that right leg straight. Turn your right toes in into your gate pose. Left arm reaches up and over. Big side body stretch. And now coming back up and through to center, you're going to lift your right toes off the mat and turn so that you're kind of facing in a diagonal between both legs and both knees. You might be more comfortable on a kickstand, tucking the back toes under. We're gonna hinge our hips back, almost as if you were going to sit your hips onto your heel. And at the same time, I'm going to counter reach and stretch my arms forward. So a really different way of working the hamstrings. And you might actually get a deeper stretch by bending slightly into that right knee. So you don't need to be going as low as what I'm doing here. You can always stay up a little higher or place your hands on your blocks. We're just really trying to wake up those right hamstrings. Let's walk our hands in, spin so you're facing towards the top of the mat, and you can come into a half splits, which is basically what we're in right now, just folding over towards your right shin. If you'd like, you can work your way into any version and variation of a full splits. So this is one of those poses, doesn't matter how long I've been practicing yoga and teaching yoga, splits are just really hard for my body, and that's fine. No big deal, it's just a pose. And the benefit of the pose is the same, whether you're really high up or all the way to the ground. Okay, one last stretch in this series. Let's make our way into our pigeon pose. So I'm just kind of gonna rock onto my right hip. And then I can bend my right knee, bringing that shin roughly parallel to the top of the mat, and then re-leveling my pelvis so I'm not leaning on one hip more than the other. And I'm gonna work into a back bend first before I fold all the way down. If you'd like to leave this out, you can just fold down. Otherwise, for your back bend, I like to just push against my front leg to lift my heart up and back. And you can also choose to walk your hands back behind you. Sometimes even grabbing a hold of your mat can be helpful. And when you're ready, we will all meet in the traditional variation of pigeon pose with or without your blocks. So block can go underneath your glute or underneath your chest or your forehead, whatever you'd like. 10 breaths here. And let's walk our hands in. Take your time here. We are all meeting back in our downward facing dog. It'll probably feel good just to stretch that right leg up and back. Any movements really that you want to take here, just to free up that hip and notice the difference. Lots of intense stretches here. And I'm not doing another vinyasa. I really want to keep this more stretchy, less strength-based, but of course you're welcome to take a flow. We'll go to the second side. Left leg rises, and you're gonna step it to the outer edge of your left hand. Back knee comes down to the floor. So into this lizard pose. You might choose to stay exactly as you are, or you can add on by curling the left toes or left foot up, rolling to the outer edge of that left foot, and maybe also coming down onto your forearms or onto your blocks. And we're here for a little over a minute, really. So for the first few breaths, this is pretty much where and when we want to make any necessary adjustments. And then trying to find some stillness. You might feel more comfortable totally relaxing your head down. Notice if you're leaning on one side more than the other. And really notice your internal dialogue, where your mind tends to go when we're in deep poses like this one. And we'll be adding a quad stretch, so you can do this from your forearms, from your block, or up from your palms, whatever is most appropriate. So I'm gonna bend into my right knee and reach back with my left hand, letting my left shoulder roll back a little here. Feel your breath go all the way down to your low belly. Very carefully release the hold of that back foot and start to come back up onto your palms. And we're going to toe heel that left foot in. So your legs, your feet, everything is hip width distance apart. And now let's find our side low lunge. So you can lift up first, and then you're going to bring your right foot over towards the left long side of your mat. So you're facing your hips and your shoulders, your chest, everything facing towards the right long side of your mat. And you can bend into that left knee using your hand to very gently encourage that thigh to externally rotate a little bit more. Maybe taking that same chin mudra. And you can straighten your left leg, turn those left toes in, gate pose, just a side body stretch. Right arm reaches up and over, relax your neck, relax your head. Coming back up through to center. So with hands on your hips, you might want to curl the right toes under so you have more support, and you're going to roll onto your left heel. So toes are pointing up, and we're going to face in between, like in a diagonal here, more so towards the top right corner of your mat, and start to hinge your hips back at the same time you're reaching your arms and your chest forward. So pulling in opposite directions, maybe adding a little bit of a bend into your left leg and left knee. Just notice how that really changes the sensations and the stretch felt throughout the back of your legs. And lifting up, keep spinning towards the top of your mat, and you're either going to hang out in your half splits right here, or you can transition to full splits. And now I always have issues with my left hip and my left hamstring, so I am going to be using a block for myself here because I do want to work on my splits, but I also know my own limits and want to make sure I stay safe no matter what I'm working on. You can kind of play around with it here. So not going past our edge, just really getting curious. We'll be transitioning from this pose into pigeon. So I'm going to move my block out of the way and then roll over onto your left hip. And you can just bring that left knee bent at a 90-degree angle, and now shift your weight back. So right now, all of our weight is on that left hip. We need to bring it back into the right, so it's evenly distributed through both sides. And you might be only able to do this with the help of a block supporting your left hip. So get settled here, and I'm gonna take that little back bend variation first before folding all the way down. First, by just pushing my hands in towards that front leg, and using that to find a lift, and then walking my hands and my arms back behind me, maybe pulling a little bit on the mat. And let's come forward and down. Keep lifting out of your waist, out of your lower back, into your pigeon pose. 10 to 20 breaths here. Try not to hold your breath. Stay fully present to your experience. Hip openers can bring up a lot. So really just practice being there for yourself. Holding space for yourself, whatever that looks like. Now let's give our lower body a bit of a break with these next poses. Meet back and down dog, any movements and stretches that feel good here. So we worked our lower body quite a bit. Now give our chest, upper back, our arms, our shoulders a little bit more attention. First doing this by coming into our puppy pose, and I'm going to do a slightly more intense variation of this pose by doing it with blocks. So if you know you have tightness in your shoulders, your arms, your upper back, you're just going to do a regular puppy pose, which is keeping your hips over your knees, walking your hands out and melting this way. Otherwise, we're doing the same thing, but with blocks underneath our elbows, and we're going to be bending. So placing our blocks, first level, should be more than enough. Keep your hips as they are, and you're going to press your hands together, bend your elbows back, and melt your forehead down as you try to bring your thumbs towards the back of your neck. So big stretch into your triceps. So this pose is sometimes called melting heart, which beautifully captures what it is that we're trying to do here. Softening into the space. Take about 5 more deep breaths. And regardless of which variation you are doing, we're all going to ease on out, finding our way back through to our tabletop pose. And you can move your props out of the way if you're doing this with your blocks. And let's set up for thread the needle. So taking a nice spinal twist, right arm underneath you, shoulder and ear to the mat. And you can extend maybe your left arm up overhead, or if there's another variation of this pose that you prefer, you're welcome to go into it. See if you can push a little bit out into your right hip. And let's bring our left hand back, push into your palm to lift. And we'll go do the same thing to the other side, left arm underneath you, shoulder and ear to the mat. Maybe extending your right arm up overhead and pushing a little bit out into your left hip this time. And let's slide it back. Push to lift on up. And let's come all the way down to our belly. We'll come into a laying chest opener. So really targeting into the pectoral muscles and the front of our shoulders and a little bit into the biceps. So I'm going to be bending my right elbow at a 90-degree angle and then rolling over onto my right hip, right shoulder, and right ear. And if you find that it's hard for you to let your head come down, you can put a block underneath you. And sometimes bringing the left hand to the low back or stepping the left foot back can be really nice. You know, for me, that's just a little too intense. About 5 breaths here on the side. Just really opening through the right side of your upper body. Should feel really nice, especially if you sit at a desk a lot or tend to hunch and round forward. And if you had your left hand behind your lower back, bring it out in front of you, straighten your legs, and we'll ease our way to the second side. So establish your foundation here. Left elbow at about a 90-degree angle, aligned with your shoulder, palms flat to the floor. Roll onto your left hip, left ear, left shoulder, maybe with a block underneath you if it's more appropriate for your neck. And you might just push your right hand into the ground, or you can bring your right hand to your low back and also step that right leg back behind you to intensify. Imagine you can send your breath exactly where you feel the most sensation here. Bring your right hand back out in front of you. Let's straighten the legs. And coming back through to center, let's press back up. Now we're going to revisit Gomukhasana, that knee pile pose that we did at the beginning of class, going deeper into it now that we've really opened up our bodies in lots of different ways. So start by stacking your right knee over your left one. And if this is still feeling challenging, you can make this a lot easier on yourself by grabbing your block and elevating your hips. You can also put a block in between your thighs if that's where you feel like there's the biggest gap. And you can also bring your block out in front of you because we're going to fold forward this time around. So if you'd like, you can repeat that same eagle arm bind. Otherwise, we're going to do an archer arm, so deeper stretch into our shoulders. Bringing your right hand in between your shoulder blades, my right elbow is pointing up, and I'm interlacing my hands behind me here. And maybe you choose to stay exactly as you are, or we're going to fold forward. And I'm not going to keep the clasp of the palms the whole time. Just gonna start off a few breaths here, really getting into my shoulders. And then staying low into the forward fold, I'm just gonna drop my hands and my arms down. 10 deep breaths here. And just notice the evolution, what has changed in your hips, in your low back as a result of your practice. how different this pose might feel the second time around. Your hands into the mat, slowly curl, lift your way out of the pose. You can just uncross your legs, maybe let your knees drop side to side a few times before we go and repeat this. So next time, have your left knee stacked over your right one. And it's up to you if you want to do your eagle arms again, or if you want to try the archer arms on the second side. This time your left hand is between the shoulder blades, right hand reaching back, interlacing here. And you can choose to stay up, or you can dive forward and down. Maybe releasing the arms and just letting them settle. 10 breaths here. And let's unwind and lift up. Uncross and release. You can just drop your knees side to side. And to close our practice, let's grab a block. We'll come into a supported bridge pose. Lower yourself all the way back down. And we're going to keep the block on its lowest height, just placing it underneath your hips, and you can pull your right knee in towards your belly and extend your left leg out in front of you. So just stretching out the hip flexors before we close our practice. This really doesn't need to be too intense. Just lengthening out at the front of our left leg. Try to keep head and shoulders heavy and relaxed on the mat. And you can bend your left leg. We'll switch sides. Take your time here. Left knee pulls in towards your chest and right leg extends out in front of you. Reaching out into that right heel. At the same time, keeping your weight evenly distributed through both legs. Let's release, bring both feet flat to the floor. You can press to lift your hips up, move your block out of the way. We won't be needing props anymore. I'm just gonna take a really simple one, letting both knees and thighs drop over to the left and reaching my right arm out. We're doing a twist to help release any tension that might still be present, especially through our lower back, from all of our hip openers and our deep stretches that we've done. So make this nice and nurturing. And float the knees and the legs back up through to center. Twist to the other side. Whenever you're ready, we meet in Shavasana, this long, well-deserved rest. Palms facing up towards the sky, closing your eyes, and relaxing every little facial muscle, just melting into the floor beneath you. Give yourself this full permission to do absolutely nothing, to be completely present, not worrying about the next thing. Just a few minutes of rest and relaxation. And let's breathe a little bit deeper. Make some movement through your extremities, Reach your arms up overhead. Stretch it all out one last time. And let's turn to one side. Push your hands into the floor to come up and take a seat. Close your eyes once you've settled here. Hands at your heart, Anjali Mudra. Acknowledging the wholeness of yourself. Acknowledging everything you did throughout this practice, anything that may have come up for you. Showing yourself some gratitude from committing to this practice. And let's close by chanting Om one time together. Inhale to chant, breathe in. Om. Thank you so very much for doing this practice with me. I would love to know how this one went for you and how you feel now, especially compared to when you first stepped onto your mat over an hour ago. Thank you again. Please leave me a comment, do subscribe, and hopefully I'll be practicing again with you very soon.